Welcome back to my channel, friends. My name is Ten, and today I want to share something really special with you. I got a discount didgeridoo for about $100. It was in pretty rough shape, but man, there was some real potential there. It was the lines on there were looking nice, but what really caught my eye was that two-tone look. There was like a light part and a dark part there, and just really caught my eye. I'm like, if I fix this up a little, it might look awesome. So here's the video of me doing exactly that. Let's jump right into it. Here's the didgeridoo that I got. Its drone note is a C sharp at 432 hertz. You could clearly see that the instrument is weathered, and there's plenty of dents, dings, and little holes, plus some cracks next to some holes on the whole instrument. Here you could see one of those holes, then another really big hole right by the mouthpiece, and this one is the one I'm worried about because it's really deep. There's a pretty decent scratch down the middle, as well as some cracks next to that scratch. Now, I don't know what this is, but it's either a burl on the tree, or it looks like somebody maybe slapped on some putty and then varnished over it. So we'll have some fun when we're sanding and we'll see if it's anything noteworthy. If you look at the bell, since it's the largest surface, you could see how incredibly weathered it looks. By the looks and smell of it, I think they used linseed oil to coat the outside of the instrument, which is where that yellow tone comes from. The instrument definitely looks like it's been neglected for quite some time. It definitely needs a little TLC, and it's gonna shine again. I mean, just look at those lines. It's got zigzags and swirls. It's got all sorts of intricate patterns. On top of the two-tone look, I don't think I'm gonna be sorry about this purchase. Now, onto the mouthpiece. The mouthpiece itself was a problem right from the start. Aside from being misshapen, there's a pretty sizable hole right at the joint of the instrument, and whenever you're playing, you could hear and even feel the air coming out of that little hole, which really messes with the back pressure. On a downward view of the mouthpiece, you could clearly see how misshapen it is. Then it's got a few rough edges, like the one over here on the top, the one over on the bottom, and another on the right hand side. Now if we take a look at the bell, you could see it looks very rough. It's like playing into a carpet. It's wavy, there's like pieces of wood missing, there's dips, there's bumps, there's even really shaggy parts further down into the bell. All of these rob you of your sound. Then if you take a look at the edges, you could see the substantial amount of water damage. Now, to kick off this project, we have to saw off this mouthpiece. It's gotta go. I'm gonna get a much bigger mouthpiece, and hopefully it'll lower the drone note of the instrument. This process was much easier than I expected. At first, I just took the saw and started scoring around the mouthpiece just to have a guide. But when I got all the way through and started putting a little force into the sawing, the mouthpiece just popped right off, which I wasn't expecting. Definitely took me by surprise when it just popped right off. But take a look at this geometry of this mouthpiece. At the bottom, it's so thick. It's almost half an inch thick. Then you get to the mouthpiece portion, and it's almost like a triangle where the edges of the mouthpiece are just always digging into your mouth. I ended up commissioning a mouthpiece from Endless Breath Didgeridoo. He's got an Etsy shop, which is one of the first places that caught my eye. I really like the agave didgeridoos, but what really caught my eye was the Pinecone mouthpieces. It looked so cool in the pictures. I knew for a fact I had to get it commissioned because this was gonna be the mouthpiece for my new didgeridoo. He also has a YouTube page where he demonstrates the instruments that he builds, as well as sharing some of the building process. And he's also on Instagram. He's doing excellent work, and it clearly shows. Now starts the fun part of this instrument build, the sanding. What I did first was I took an oscillating tool with one of those little triangular sanders that they have with the Velcro on there, slapped on some 40 grit sandpaper, and just started going to town on the instrument. Thankfully, the wood was very thick, so I didn't have to worry about sanding a hole in it, but I still had to be careful. I didn't want to sand any dips or grooves or valleys into it either. The 40 grit paper is definitely gonna help remove the old stain that's on there. It's gonna remove the scratches. It's gonna help address most of those dings and dents, and it'll definitely allow us to see what was underneath all that stain really fast. Not only was I stripping the old stain on there, I was also shaping the instrument a little, because like you saw with the mouthpiece where it was very misshapen on the outside, the whole instrument was a little misshapen. So I had to go through the process of rounding it out and give it a nice smooth texture. After I was done stripping the first layer, it was time to switch to a random orbital sander from the oscillating tool. Now look at this. Oh my goodness. Look at this pattern. After I got rid of all that oil and just that weathered look, these lines just came to life. I still have to sand a few spots here and a few spots there. Man, I just can't get over these zigzagging lines along the bottom of the bell. They look so beautiful. I knew I had something special here in this didgeridoo. I'm gonna keep working on this, and I'm gonna start working on the darker colored pieces in the back. I wonder what crazy patterns or colors are hiding underneath that oil that's on top of there in the darker areas. After some further sanding with the 100 grit sandpaper, it was time to get the mouthpiece bonded onto the instrument. I ended up finding this little piece of either cherry wood or red oak. I'm guessing it's probably red oak, since I believe cherry is darker. And I proceeded to drill a hole in the center, slightly smaller than the diameter of the hole of the instrument. This way, I have a guaranteed lineup. When the mouthpiece came in the mail, I put it on top of the instrument, and I was just looking at it. It looked beautiful, but something felt like it was missing. Then I found that little piece of wood, put it in between the mouthpiece and the instrument, and that was it. It clicked. It just needed some sort of transition from the mouthpiece to the instrument. Sadly, I thought I pressed record for this next part, but I guess I didn't, or the camera didn't register the record, and I missed me putting the instrument together. But here's the result of the mouthpiece and the joint bonded to the actual didgeridoo. I ended up using 2 giant clamps that I taped together with some electric tape, and some wood at the bottom of the bell for the clamp, and a little piece of wood at the top on the mouthpiece so that the clamp wouldn't damage the instrument, number one. Number 2, ended up mixing some of this Gorilla Glue 5-minute epoxy, and that went onto the joint and the mouthpiece before putting on the giant clamps. After letting it cure for about an hour and a half, I felt confident enough to take the oscillating tool with the saw edge, and then I ended up cutting off the pointed ends at the joint to round it off and get it ready for sanding. Now, since the mouthpiece was larger in diameter than the body of the instrument as well as the expansion joint, I went back to 80 grit sandpaper so that I wouldn't be there all day long sanding, and proceeded to start sanding down the shape into its correct form. I did, after all, request that the mouthpiece come in a little bigger than the neck of the instrument. This would allow me to bond it and then sand it in a reductive fashion, all but guaranteeing a perfect fit. I would end up with a really nice smooth transition from the body of the instrument to the joint to the mouthpiece and to the playing area that gets pressed on your face. After about another hour of sanding and working on that mouthpiece almost exclusively, it was time to get the leaf blower and blow away all the dust and take a good look at all the work that I've done. Now, to get the instrument even smoother, what I did was I took a wet rag and I ended up, well, first off, to clean off all the dust from the instrument and see what I was doing. But the other reason was that the wood would soak up some of that water and puff up a little bit. This would allow me to then take the sandpaper again and sand it down, getting rid of all those little puffed up parts, making the instrument even smoother after every single sanding. Now, here we have the old mouthpiece. What I wanted to do was I wanted to sand down the mouthpiece and use it as like a tester. Now, you see on the instrument before it was all yellow with the linseed oil that they put on there, or I'm guessing linseed oil. I have 3 different products, so I wanted to apply them to the wood to see how they would react. Would they change the color? Would they get shiny? Would they turn matte? What would happen with this specific product on this specific instrument? We're getting closer and closer. Right now, 300 grit sandpaper and working our way up. Still doing the same exact technique. Still using the random orbital sander, still rolling the instrument back and forth while sanding it, keeping everything moving so that we have a nice circular smooth surface. This day was especially windy. As you could see with the plants in the back, I ended up having to tape down my makeshift table, and the flaps kept flapping up, which caused the power cord to get trapped underneath there, and it was constantly just pulling on the sander. Now that the outside of the instrument is sufficiently done, it was time to address the part that I was dreading the most, the inside of the instrument. It definitely takes a lot longer to do the inside, and if you have a look, there's plenty of holes, grooves, pits, and everything else inside. I ended up getting a round rotary burr that I put on some extension bits and attached it to a drill. Once attached to the drill, the bit was gonna reach just about the whole entire length of the bell. Things didn't really start off all that great though. As soon as I pressed the button on the drill, the bit popped out. I don't know why. I guess I didn't tighten it enough or whatever the case is, but it was a fun start to the inside of this project. After about 30 minutes with the rotary burr, things were looking a lot better on the inside of the instrument. I had smoothed it out. I had gotten rid of all the loose pieces and gotten rid of the little shag that was there. The tool was much easier to use than I had originally anticipated. Check out how smooth that is. As you could see, there's a little bit of a lip on the bottom right hand side, which is fine because I did drill the hole in the joint piece to be smaller than the mouthpiece hole. I knew that there was gonna be a little lip on one of the sides, so I took the same exact drill bit and used a screwdriver as a guide to see where I needed to sand it, and just kept going up and down the inside of the instrument, widening out the hole, but also making sure to get the expansion joint. Here's where the weather took a turn for the worse, so I had to go to my apartment and finish the rest. I took my trusty broom handle and a little bit of hot glue, glued on some sandpaper, and proceeded to use this as a tool to get a nice rounded shape on the inside of the instrument while smoothing out those edges that the rotary burr didn't get. Same like before, start with 120 sandpaper and progress to ever higher grit. For the bell, I ended up taking a slightly different approach. I took one of the oscillating tools sanding triangles and I stuck it to the edge of the broom handle. Then I was just able to attach the sandpaper to the little sanding triangle, and I was able to very nicely sand out the bell of the instrument without too much complication. After all the handling of the instrument, I had to sand it down one more time because there was fingerprints on there, the oils. After that, it was time to finalize the mouthpiece. What I ended up doing was I sanded the edges round and then periodically kept placing it up to my mouth to see how it felt, pressed against my face, if it was biting, if it felt smooth. Once I was happy with the results, it was time to seal the inside of the instrument. I ended up using this polyurethane single coat. I tape the edge of the instrument, then I take the polyurethane and I pour it into the instrument, and then painstakingly for the next 20 minutes, I just sit there and turn it and turn it and turn it, so that it slowly coats all the way around multiple times, making sure to get any of the holes and gaps, and then slowly let it work towards the front of the instrument. I've used it in the past on a different didgeridoo that I did, and it's holding up really well for a year and a half so far. It's really nice and easy to clean. The inside is extra smooth because of the clear coat layer, so the sound from it projects really nicely. I decided to do the same thing with this. As you could see here, we're just about to the edge. We're gonna keep doing the same exact thing, slowly twisting it while tilting it forward, and the very last little bit. Now the inside of the instrument is going to be 100% waterproof. I left the instrument standing upright for the next 24 hours so that it could dry and cure inside. And now about 30 hours later, here are the results. You could see that it's very nicely coated on the inside. It's very smooth. There's a little bit of a line up on the top, but it's not going to affect it much. It's still a very smooth, uniform surface, so the sound is going to be able to bounce off of it and travel through the instrument a lot better than it was. And now, once again, we sand the outside of the instrument because it was handled while doing the inside, so it left fingerprints. Then we do the wet rag again so that we could raise the grain and get a really nice, good sanded finish on there with some 400 grit sandpaper this time, because after this we're doing our first coat. After it dries, I give it one more really good all around from top to bottom sanding. After doing my little test on the mouthpiece, I ended up going with this polyacrylic coating on the instrument. It didn't change the color too much, and I noticed that it boldened up some of the lines on there while also having a matte finish. It wasn't going to be too shiny, so it was going to keep its very natural look. As you could see after the very first coat, look at how beautiful it looks already. It's just the very first coat, and already it's brought out a lot of the lines, a lot of the different colors and textures that's on there, including the mouthpiece and the joint. Now we go back again to the 400 grit sandpaper, and we're gonna sand the first coat. The first coat was just basically a priming. This time when we paint, we're gonna paint with slightly different strokes of the brush so in the end it doesn't have visible brush strokes on the instrument. It's just gonna look very nice and smooth. Now it was time to address the drips at the bottom of the instrument. I took a regular carpenter's knife. I scraped it until I got down to the wood. Then I ended up taking some sandpaper and getting rid of all the rest of the pieces. I made sure that everything was sanded nice and smooth. There was no bumps, there was no rough edges. And then I ended up taking the polyacrylic with an even smaller brush. I dabbed on the clear coating. After everything was dry, it was back at it again, this time with 500 grit sandpaper. After going over the instrument one whole time, I took the polyacrylic and did another coat from top to bottom, from the mouthpiece all the way to the very bottom of the instrument. After the instrument had dried, it was time to take the 1200 sandpaper, and this was gonna be just to get rid of any kind of paintbrush strokes and just give it a very smooth matte finish from top to bottom. Here's the end result. The instrument ended up coming out so beautiful. With every single coat that I put on there, the vibrancy of the lines just came out more. All the knots in the wood and the burl in that one edge, the mouthpiece and the joint wood look fantastic together. It really does tie everything in with those earthy tones. Alright, it's time for the sound check. I'm loving it.